Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The revelation hit like a lightning bolt that no one in the Forrester family saw coming, and Bill's eyes widened as the pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place. The realization of Luna's elaborate scheme washing over him like a tidal wave of shock, anger, and disbelief. For weeks, he had noticed subtle inconsistencies in her behavior, tiny cracks in the facade that Dylan had been completely oblivious to, blissfully unaware that the woman he had trusted with his heart, who had whispered sweet assurances of love and loyalty, had been concealing an identity that no one could have anticipated, not even the most vigilant observer in the family. Bill had gone over every conversation, every interaction, every carefully constructed smile and gentle touch, and now, standing in the heart of the Forrester estate, surrounded by walls that had witnessed countless secrets and betrayals, he finally understood the full scope of the deception. Luna had been playing Dylan from the very beginning, her disguise so meticulously crafted that even the most intimate observers had been blinded by their own assumptions, their expectations of who she was, and the trust she had painstakingly built into every gesture, every word, every tender moment that now, in hindsight, seemed designed to manipulate, to entrap, and to hide her true intentions. The way she had studied Dylan, mimicked his mannerisms, mirrored his hopes and dreams, it was as if she had infiltrated his very soul, gaining access not only to his trust but to the deepest, most vulnerable corners of his heart, leaving him vulnerable to a betrayal that was as intricate as it was devastating. And Bill could see it all now, the way she had orchestrated each meeting, each conversation, each subtle emotional cue to guide him exactly where she wanted, to make him believe in a love that was in truth a carefully engineered illusion. The Forrester family, hearing the news moments later, reacted with a combination of horror, disbelief, and the quiet, simmering rage that only came from realizing that someone so close had been hiding in plain sight, pretending to be someone she was not while undermining their most cherished bonds, their sense of reality, and the fragile trust that tied them together as a family. Ridge, ever the protector of his loved ones, felt his blood boil as the betrayal of someone so entwined with Dylan's life cut like a dagger, a feeling that was compounded by the fact that Luna's actions had not only hurt Dylan but had threatened the very stability of the Forrester family, revealing vulnerabilities and weaknesses that none of them had realized existed, vulnerabilities that a cunning mind like Luna's had exploited with cold, calculated precision, leaving the entire household reeling from the shock of how thoroughly she had infiltrated their lives under the guise of love, friendship, and loyalty. Brooke, who had always believed in the goodness of people and the redemptive power of love, felt her faith and judgment shaken to the core, the revelation forcing her to confront a harsh, uncomfortable truth, that appearances could be so deceiving, that someone capable of such manipulation could walk among them, smiling, laughing, and pretending to care while all the while pursuing a personal agenda that was hidden, almost sinister in its scope, and now laid bare in the most dramatic and undeniable way, and she couldn't help but feel a deep, gnawing sense of responsibility, wondering how she had missed the signs, how she had allowed her optimism to cloud her perception, leaving Dylan and everyone else vulnerable to the consequences of Luna's cunning, her deceptive charm, and her relentless determination to control the narrative of the lives around her. Even Steffi, who had grown up witnessing countless family scandals and betrayals, was stunned into silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down on her like an invisible hand, constraining her ability to process the full magnitude of the deception, as she replayed in her mind every interaction, every seemingly innocuous conversation, every shared secret that now appeared to have been carefully choreographed by Luna to manipulate Dylan's emotions, to draw him closer under false pretenses, and to conceal her true self in a mask so convincing that it had fooled them all. And Dylan, when the truth finally came crashing down on him, experienced a maelstrom of emotions that left him reeling. Anger, confusion, grief, and an almost paralyzing sense of betrayal, each feeling layering upon the other, creating a storm within his heart that threatened to consume him entirely, as he realized that the woman he had loved, trusted, and confided in, who had made promises that now felt hollow, had been orchestrating a deception of staggering complexity, one that not only played with his heart but had manipulated his perceptions of reality, his understanding of love, and the very foundation of the life he had built and believed was genuine. Bill, watching Dylan struggle to reconcile the truth with the love he thought he had shared with Luna, felt a mix of protective fury and strategic calculation, knowing that the implications of the reveal went far beyond personal heartbreak. This was a situation that demanded action, precision, and a careful consideration of how to expose Luna fully while minimizing the long-term damage to Dylan, the Forrester family, and the fragile network of trust that had been shaken to its core. He thought about the meticulous planning, the hidden clues, the subtle manipulations that now, in retrospect, seemed glaringly obvious, and he felt a complex mix of admiration for Luna's cunning, even as he despised her motives, because the level of sophistication required to maintain such a disguise, to manipulate Dylan with such finesse, was a testament to her intelligence and capacity for strategy, making the betrayal sting even more acutely because it was not born of impulsive emotion but of deliberate calculation, and that awareness only deepened the resolve burning within Bill to take decisive action, to reclaim control over a situation that had spiraled into chaos through no fault of his own, but rather through the cunning of a woman who had used disguise, charm, and deception as weapons in a high-stakes game of manipulation. The Forrester family gathered in the main room of the estate, each of them processing the revelation in their own way, voices low with disbelief, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anger, as Bill explained, with painstaking clarity, the extent of Luna's masquerade, detailing the moments when her disguise had fooled them, the subtle emotional cues she had used to manipulate Dylan, and the psychological strategies she had employed to gain his unwavering trust, making it clear that the depth of her deception had been extraordinary, leaving no room for doubt or denial, and as the words sank in, the atmosphere became electric with tension, a palpable energy that seemed to vibrate through the walls, through the furniture, through every corner of the room, because the Forrester family, for all their experience with scandal and betrayal, had never encountered a deception of such intricate design, a betrayal so personal, so psychologically invasive, and so emotionally devastating, and they realized in that moment that the dynamics of their family, the bonds they had taken for granted, and the trust they had assumed was unshakable, had all been challenged, tested, and fundamentally altered by Luna's cunning performance. Dylan, finally able to find his voice, confronted the enormity of the betrayal, his words trembling but resolute as he expressed the raw pain of realizing that every tender moment, every promise whispered in confidence, every shared dream that had felt so real and grounding, had been manipulated, curated, and designed to keep him in a state of emotional vulnerability, to blind him to the reality of who Luna truly was, and to ensure that her secret agenda remained hidden until the precise moment she chose to reveal or exploit it. Ridge, with a blend of paternal protectiveness and strategic calculation, began considering the implications for the family's reputation, the potential fallout, and the steps needed to safeguard Dylan, the business, and the emotional well-being of everyone involved, knowing that Luna's revelation could ripple outward, creating consequences that would test loyalties, strain relationships, and challenge the core of what it meant to be part of the Forrester family. Brooke, still grappling with the betrayal's emotional weight, felt an urgent need to provide comfort, guidance, and a sense of grounding for Dylan, even as she struggled internally with the fear that the Forrester family's cohesion might be irreparably damaged by Luna's audacious deception, realizing that the very fabric of their lives had been infiltrated by a cunning mind, and that navigating the path forward would require resilience, unity, and a clarity of judgment that would be tested in ways they had never imagined. The emotional storm continued to rage, with each family member oscillating between disbelief, anger, sorrow, and an overwhelming sense of incredulity, as they processed how Luna, who had been presumed to be a loving, genuine presence in Dylan's life, had instead orchestrated a drama that was both intimate and public, personal and deeply invasive, leaving no aspect of their emotional world untouched and challenging every assumption they had made about trust, loyalty, and the boundaries of deception. As the hours passed, conversations unfolded that were heavy with emotion, fraught with tension, and filled with both accusations and pleas for understanding, as Bill meticulously laid out the evidence of Luna's disguise, recounting the subtle inconsistencies, the orchestrated coincidences, and the psychological patterns that ultimately revealed her true identity, and in doing so, he not only exposed the depths of her manipulation but also reminded the family of the resilience, strength, and strategic thinking that had always defined the Forresters, emphasizing that while Luna's betrayal had been profound, it could be confronted, understood, and ultimately overcome with unity, vigilance, and a renewed commitment to honesty, transparency, and the bonds that had sustained them through decades of scandal, heartbreak, and high-stakes drama. Dylan, though shattered, began to find a glimmer of clarity amid the pain, recognizing that the revelation, as devastating as it was, also provided a roadmap for reclaiming his life, re-establishing boundaries, and confronting Luna with a combination of courage, intelligence, and strategic insight that would prevent further manipulation. And in that moment, a subtle shift occurred in the room, as the shock slowly gave way to determination, resilience, and a cautious optimism that, despite the enormity of the betrayal, the Forrester family could, and would emerge stronger, more united, and more attuned to the complexities of human behavior, deception, and the resilience required to navigate a world where even the closest bonds could be tested by a masterful disguise. And as the day turned into night, with shadows lengthening across the Forrester estate, Bill stood in quiet contemplation, acutely aware that the storm was far from over, that Luna's actions had set in motion a series of events whose consequences would ripple through their lives for months, if not years to come, but also resolute in the knowledge that the truth, once revealed, was a powerful weapon, and that with careful planning, unwavering support, and the unshakable bond of family, they could confront Luna, protect Dylan, and restore the sense of stability, trust, and love that had been so cunningly threatened, turning the shocking revelation of a disguise into a catalyst for growth, resilience, and the reaffirmation of what it truly meant to be a Forrester. A family tested, betrayed, but ultimately unbroken. As the hours stretched into an almost surreal continuum of tension and disbelief, the Forrester family remained locked in the kind of stunned silence that only a revelation of such magnitude could produce, and even as the initial shock began to settle into a dull, aching awareness, the implications of Luna's deception continued to reverberate through every corner of their hearts and minds. Bill, pacing the grand halls of the Forrester estate, felt the weight of the truth pressing down on him like a physical force, each step heavy with the knowledge that the careful balance of relationships, loyalties, and trust had been upended in a single breathtakingly audacious act of manipulation, and he knew that the fallout would not only touch Dylan but ripple outward to touch every family member, every friend, and every connection that Luna had so deliberately woven into her web of deception. He reflected on the subtle clues that he had initially dismissed, an almost imperceptible hesitation in her voice, a fleeting expression of uncertainty, moments when her eyes seemed to flicker with something unrecognizable, and he marveled, with a mixture of horror and begrudging respect, at how thoroughly she had maintained the illusion of authenticity, crafting each interaction to appear spontaneous and genuine while every move was, in fact, calculated, premeditated, and aimed at achieving a long-term goal that none of them had anticipated. And the realization that Dylan had been completely unaware of this elaborate ruse ignited within Bill a burning combination of protective fury and strategic urgency. Across the room, Dylan grappled with emotions that churned violently within him, betrayal, humiliation, grief, and a heartache so profound it seemed to lodge itself in his very chest, making every breath feel like a battle, every thought a tug-of-war between disbelief and the undeniable clarity of the evidence laid bare before him. He remembered the moments that had once seemed simple and unremarkable: Luna's laughter, the way she had listened so intently, the subtle way she had mirrored his own thoughts and fears, and now saw them as threads in a tapestry of deceit, woven with meticulous care to ensure that he remained blind to the truth, blind to her true motives, and completely vulnerable to the emotional trap she had so skillfully designed. And the realization left him reeling, as if the ground beneath him had been ripped away, leaving him teetering on the edge of a chasm filled with anger, sorrow, and confusion. Ridge, standing nearby with a clenched jaw and tightly folded arms, felt the familiar surge of protective instinct that had always defined his relationship with his family, and as he watched Dylan struggle to comprehend the betrayal, a plan began to form in his mind. A careful, measured response that would expose Luna fully, safeguard Dylan from further manipulation, and restore, at least in part, the fractured sense of trust that had been shattered by her actions. But even as he formulated strategies, Ridge could not ignore the emotional devastation, the raw wound that had been inflicted on Dylan, and the heavy burden of responsibility that came with guiding him through the storm of anger, grief, and confusion. Brooke, meanwhile, moved with a mixture of maternal instinct and strategic caution, speaking softly to Dylan in an attempt to ground him even as her own heart ached, realizing that the emotional fallout from Luna's revelation would not be contained to this single moment, but would instead echo through weeks, months, and possibly years. affecting decisions, relationships, and the very fabric of the family's daily life, and she knew that providing comfort while maintaining clarity and authority would require a delicate balance, a feat made all the more challenging by the fact that Luna's deception had been so thorough, so psychologically intricate, and so personally invasive. Steffi, usually composed even in the face of scandal, felt a rare, almost physical sensation of shock, her mind racing to reconcile the version of Luna she had believed she knew with the manipulative figure now revealed to have been orchestrating events with deliberate precision, and she began to see, with a clarity both painful and illuminating, that deception could be layered, complex, and impossible to detect without careful scrutiny, and that even the most intuitive, vigilant family members could be caught off guard when faced with a mind capable of such sophisticated manipulation. As the family members continued to process, Bill's mind was a flurry of calculated moves, protective instincts, and unspoken fury, as he realized that the only way to truly confront the situation would be to carefully manage the timing and manner of Luna's exposure, ensuring that the evidence could not be denied, that Dylan would understand the full scope of her manipulation, and that the Forrester family could reclaim a sense of control over a situation that had been hijacked by deception. Each revelation Bill shared about the depth and breadth of Luna's masquerade seemed to hit like a hammer, each story and piece of evidence eliciting gasps, tears, and clenched fists, and the atmosphere in the Forrester mansion grew increasingly charged, the air thick with the kind of tension that could only exist when long-held assumptions are shattered, trust is broken, and the fragile equilibrium of family dynamics is suddenly exposed to forces of manipulation that no one had anticipated. Dylan, struggling to hold back the tidal wave of emotion, demanded answers, his voice cracking as he interrogated the family and Bill about the precise ways Luna had deceived him, the hidden signs he had missed, the moments that had seemed inconsequential but were in fact carefully orchestrated cues designed to manipulate his perception, and each response only deepened the mixture of heartbreak and indignation coursing through him, as he realized that the very essence of his emotional reality had been constructed by someone who had exploited his vulnerabilities with precision and purpose. Ridge, with the steadiness that always seemed to anchor the family during crises, explained how psychological manipulation works, the subtle techniques Luna had likely employed to gain Dylan's trust and guide his emotional responses, and in doing so, he not only clarified the situation but also armed Dylan with the knowledge needed to reclaim agency, to begin the process of disentangling himself from the web of deceit, and to take the first steps toward emotional recovery, even as the shock and heartbreak continued to gnaw at him. Brooke's role became increasingly pivotal as she mediated conversations, offering emotional support while gently guiding Dylan toward a rational understanding of the events, reminding him that while Luna's deception had been profound and hurtful, it was ultimately a reflection of her choices, not his worth, and that rebuilding trust, reclaiming agency, and navigating the emotional fallout would require patience, courage, and the unwavering support of the Forrester family. Meanwhile, Steffi and the other family members processed the implications of Luna's actions in their own way, grappling with feelings of betrayal, guilt for not noticing sooner, and the complex interplay of emotions that arise when someone so close is revealed to have been operating under a false identity. And as the hours passed, the family began to collectively understand that while Luna's deception had been elaborate, calculated, and devastating, the revelation also provided an opportunity. Chance to strengthen bonds, reinforce vigilance, and prove that the Forrester family, despite repeated trials and betrayals, possessed the resilience, intelligence, and emotional fortitude to confront even the most audacious manipulations. The conversation turned to practical considerations: what steps to take next, how to protect Dylan from further manipulation, and the possibility of confronting Luna directly. Each plan weighed with the understanding that timing, strategy, and emotional readiness would be critical in ensuring that any confrontation would not escalate into further harm, and that the family could emerge from this crisis with both dignity and a renewed sense of unity. As the night deepened, shadows cast long shapes across the estate, mirroring the looming uncertainty of the days ahead, and Bill, ever the strategist, began to plot the path forward. Considering not only the immediate need for justice and clarity but also the long-term implications of Luna's actions for the family's emotional and social stability, the management of public perception, and the preservation of Dylan's well-being, recognizing that every choice made now would have reverberations far beyond the walls of the Forrester mansion. Dylan, after hours of conversation, reflection, and emotional processing, began to feel the faint stirrings of resolve, a recognition that while he had been deceived, he was not powerless, that understanding the full scope of Luna's manipulation equipped him to reclaim control, establish boundaries, and approach the situation with a combination of emotional intelligence, careful strategy, and the support of the family, transforming Heartbreak into a catalyst for growth, self-awareness, and renewed determination. The family's discussions moved seamlessly between emotional venting and strategic planning, balancing grief and anger with the necessity of practical action, as they considered ways to prevent similar manipulations in the future, to safeguard their loved ones, and to confront Luna in a manner that would ensure accountability while minimizing collateral damage, each voice contributing to a growing consensus that while the revelation had been shocking, it could also be a turning point, a moment that defined not only Luna's fate but the resilience, unity, and strategic acumen of the Forrester family as a whole. As the dawn approached, bringing with it the pale light of a new day, the family members, though exhausted and emotionally drained, began to find clarity, each person understanding their role in the unfolding drama, the steps necessary to protect Dylan, and the importance of confronting deception with a combination of intellect, emotional strength, and unwavering familial loyalty. And in that moment, despite the pain, betrayal, and lingering uncertainty, there was a subtle but unmistakable shift, a sense that the Forrester family, tested yet unbroken, could confront the storm, navigate the treacherous waters of manipulation, and ultimately emerge stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before, ready to face Luna, reclaim their sense of control, and restore the trust, stability, and love that had been so audaciously challenged.